Hello everyone, and welcome to our question and answers discussion today on Design Manager. My name's Brad, and I'll be fielding your questions today. As usual, if you happen to miss a portion of our discussion, you can always go to our Help Center at knowledge.designmanager.com, go to the Webinars menu, and select Recorded Webinars, and you'll find our question and answer webinars underneath that area as well with all of our other more traditional discussions. With that being said, I'm ready to get going. So Lindsay will be helping us by asking me the questions today. And Lindsay, I'm ready whenever you are.
All right. Hi, everyone. The first question that was sent in to us was, what reports are recommended to show clients overall their project progress?
Okay, excellent question. Now, when considering providing documentation to clients, you really want to focus on a few factors. The most important being, of course, not showing them your cost and markup and those types of things, unless, of course, you are being more transparent with that information with the client. So I can think of two reports that I often immediately suggest for something like that. So if we go under our reports, we'll go under project management, and they're going to be both listed here. And notice they both say client on them. Client accounting inquiry and client status. Let's focus on client status first. I think it's a more direct answer to the individual's question. The client status report is going to show us items, of course, items being what we present and propose and invoice to the client, rather than the components, which are more of our vendor-based information. Okay? We're also going to show our prices, not our costs to our vendor. We're also going to show some fiscal activities, such as deposits being received, whether or not an item has been invoiced, along with pertinent order tracking information. So let's give this report a quick view, and we can see what's in there. Now you're going to run this report for a singular client, and we'll select our Carter client as our example, and you can narrow it down for a single project. We'll leave the project range blank to have all of the projects for the client, if that is the case. And that goes hand in hand with ranges in general for our reports. In Design Manager, you only want to use a range if you're going to narrow the scope of the report. If you want to see all of the projects or locations or proposals, simply leave them blank. We have a few other options on here as well. The Show Items selection allows you to select every item in the project. Items that are not completed. Completed items, or what we call in progress, which is very handy. These are items that are ordered from the vendor and not yet invoiced to the client. So you can really hone the subset of items that you want to show to your client. You have a calculation option, which is how Design Manager is going to show the price to the client on the report. The options are highest value, either the estimated, which is the information, the price that you type into your project specifications, or the actual. That's going to be the price that you truly invoice the client. You could select simply estimate. This would only be you typed into the project and specifications regardless of what you've invoiced the client. And then you can flip that around with the actual selection. This is going to only show what you have invoiced to the client, or estimate of actual is 0. So over time we've added more of these selections to really give you option of what price you want to show to the client, and even at various stages in the life cycle of the project. Show Details is simply going to have additional information listed. Makes the report a little bit longer, but I find a lot of that information to be extremely helpful, so I usually leave that selected to yes. And the report format. We can group it within locations within the project, by proposal and then location, which is convenient. The client often resonates with the proposals or estimates that are given, so this will break the report by proposal first and then locations within the proposal. And another convenient option is summary by proposal or location. So rather than listing each item, we'll show one line. Let's do detail by location as our first example, just to see the information on here. So we see the client, the project, any ranges, of course, would appear as well. Then we have our cells grouped by location, and then item reference number within the location. So we see the reference number, the quantity and unit of measure, 2 lines of the description. We do that just for keeping the report brief as possible, yet still giving enough information to the client. Whether or not the item's been proposed, we see the proposal date and proposal number, the price, again, according to our pricing selection, along with our sales tax, whether or not any deposit has been received, and conveniently even the check number associated with that deposit, and the balance due. And this could be the estimated or the actual invoice balance due as well. And finally, we even see our paid column for when the client has paid on the invoice itself and an estimated balance due. So you have a nice snapshot of the fiscal activity going on with the item, the balance due, the future amount due for the client, etc. And lastly, we have some order tracking information. By default, we're going to show the order date, expected ship and deliver date, but you can even refine those under File, Company Settings, Advanced, whoops. That was my fault. Under File, Company, Advanced, you can set which of those options you want as well. Let's go back in there briefly. And I just want to show another option, which is our summary by proposal or location. I like to provide this to the client because it gives a very succinct and digestible version of the report, where we're going to see the project, the client, whether or not it's on a proposal. This one has none, but if we look at proposal 1, we can see just one line per location within that proposal, again, giving the client something that's much more easy to take a quick look at and see where they are on a more of a proposal/location basis. So the client status report, created by us with the intent for you to provide it to your client. Second part of that was the client is a report that we call the client accounting inquiry. Rather than showing the items themselves, this is going to be all of our accounting activity with the client, which they could certainly request if they want to see the funds they've received, invoices, payments upon those invoices, etc. But particularly if they want to provide this documentation to their accounting firm, etc. The client accounting inquiry, very simple, one line per transaction. The date it was recorded, what type of transaction, deposit, invoice, payment on invoice, etc. The relevant document number, proposal number, or invoice number, even the client's check number, and all of the various fiscal transaction types. How much was invoiced, what was the amount of the receipt or deposit, and even the transaction description as well. So I find myself providing this to the client if they just want a history of what we have recorded, but they can coincide and reconcile with their information as well. So long question short, 2 reports that are my knee-jerk reports when I'm thinking about providing to the client. Number 1, client status report, and 2, the client accounting inquiry.
All right, Brad, thank you for that. The next question that just came in, so once you have received your requested deposit and you've entered that, how do you then show the remaining balance that's still left on a client's proposal?
Excellent question as well. And I have an answer. So let's go to our documents in accounting. We'll select one of our proposals, and here's a perfect example. So for the Carter's Pennington home, we have one proposal. We requested $99.17, and that's the amount that we received as well. Okay, but as we can see in our document accounting window, the total of that proposal was just over $20,000. So what we can do to provide the client, let's call it an estimated balance due on the proposal, is simply highlight the proposal and click the reprint option. From here, we want to use the selection to show actual deposits. And what this will do is it's simply going to reformat the total region of the document so that we can see any and all deposits that we received from the client, and even some information such as the check number and check date. So let's go to the last page here. We can see we have the subtotal of the proposal itself. Here's our freight for the entire document, our estimated sales tax, the original proposal amount. Then we have this, let's call, subsection of our deposit information. So we can see we received one deposit with client check number 3325 and the date, the total amount. And again, if I have multiple deposits, they all list here individually, and then we can see the deposit total and the current estimated amount due on the proposal. A very common request from your clients, and you can simply access it by reprinting the proposal using the Show Actual Deposits option. And notice, once I've selected that option, Design Manager remembers that I want to use it. If I unselect it, that's how it will present the next time. So Design Manager always remembers the current setting of the actual deposits and defaults it for you. Great question, Lindsay.
All right, we're going to keep on deposits. What to do if a client gives you more than the requested deposit amount?
Another common question and a very good one. Let's see if we have an example here. So let's imagine we have a proposal 2 for the Carter's Pennington home. Now I've requested $968.18, but the Carters tend to deal more with rounded numbers. And let's say they actually give us a check for $1,000. So we record it in the exact same manner. So I can either right-click and do New Deposit from Client, or I can simply click my Cash Receipt button to get to our new Cash Receipt window. Now, with the new Cash Receipt window, we always want to enter the actual amount, of course. So if they gave us $1,000, we're going to enter $1,000 into our amount field. Payment type, let's imagine in our example that they provided the payment via check. Put the check number in, today's date is fine for our example. And notice, conveniently, my proposal is already selected on my Client Deposit Retainer Proposal grid because that was the document that I had highlighted when I clicked the new Cash Receipt button. However, right now, though, Design Manager is assuming that I am going to be asking for $968.18 as indicated by the This Payment column. That's not what occurred, though. The client truly gave me $1,000. So what we simply need to do is click the Edit button as indicated by the pencil, change the amount on the Edit Cash Receipt Payment, and now, if we look at our totals region, the total deposit retainer matches the receipt and the amount with a difference of 0. So very easily, on the new Cash Receipt window, always input the amount they truly gave you and simply use the Edit button, either for the proposal itself, or retainer, or even a payment on invoice as well. You can always tell Design Manager what the client truly paid for. And by clicking OK, we can now see in our information bar that our total requested deposit is still $968.18, but we actually received $1,000. And of course, that $1,000 would be the amount that would be shown when we reprint the proposal, as we just indicated. Great question, Lindsay.
All right, next question that came in deals with invoicing. So when is the best time to invoice clients during the project, especially since the invoices can't be reversed?
Very fundamental question and critical to proper accounting for our design industry. The method of accounting that Design Manager utilizes is known as accrual. And in accrual accounting, all of the fiscal magic really occurs with the concept of the invoice, either the invoice that you receive and record from your vendors, and ultimately the client invoices you generate to provide for your clients upon completion. Now, with that methodology, we use the proposal to take care of all of the natural ebbs and flows in the design process. So if we're working on our custom sofa, we're going to have changes in the fabric, or there's going to be upgrades in the trim, or those types of things. We want to use the proposal to reflect all of those changes to the client. Invoicing of the client is going to occur as the final step. And I mean final in the sense that we have delivered or provided the goods and services as indicated. The client's received that merchandise, taken ownership of it, and the client invoice itself becomes the physical, fiscal, and conceptual transfer of ownership from our company to the client. So that being said, you do not want to invoice the client until the product is entirely completed and delivered to their residence. Okay? If you need to get additional funds, you can process additional deposit requests through your proposal and other methodologies to keep your cash flow adequate, but you're always going to invoice when the merchandise itself is delivered. Now, you don't have to wait for all the merchandise. Some design firms will. They want an entire job to be delivered and installed. If you may want to simply, if the custom sofa is one piece that's delivered and finalized, you can invoice that individually. But always want to invoice at the absolute final stage of the design process in the fact that the client has actually received and taken ownership of the merchandise. Great question, Lindsay, because it's really fundamental to the accounting methodology of design management.
All right, next question that came in, how does sales tax flow through Design Manager?
Okay, another great question. In brief, because we could spend hours talking about the intricacies of sales tax, and it's a very good question considering the one that preceded it about client invoicing. In Design Manager, with the accrual accounting method, sales tax from your client is only due upon invoicing the client. Okay, so again, using our proposal to estimate tax to the client and perhaps even getting a deposit on a percentage or all of that sales tax, you can absolutely do that. Okay? But it's only when we truly invoice the client for the merchandise is the sales tax going to be charged and ultimately due into the period of the invoice date itself. Now, to back things up, another question that we get very frequently on sales tax is, what if the vendor charges you sales tax? Well, there's two ways to really handle that. One is, and I generally prefer this, I can simply blend the cost of the sales tax as cost, to the client. I'll mark up that value. Some people may actually make a second component for it and indicate that component is non-taxable. Ideally, of course, you want to be dealing with vendors from whom you've given your tax ID and they don't charge you sales tax, but the option does come up. So if we look at one of our proposals, we can see that we're estimating our sales tax. And I've chosen to ask for my deposit to be including that sales tax. Again, I can receive some of that money. It's not due to the tax authority until I invoice the client, so I might as well put it into my bank account and perhaps accrue a little interest on that type of thing. So we're estimating the sales tax. Now, not until we actually go and invoice those products is our sales tax going to be due. So if we look at our reprinted invoice, this is the true tax that we're going to be liable to return to the tax authority. This 9170, when we make the invoice, and this was created in August of 2015, that activity goes into our sales tax account as defined on our company information window. Oops, pardon. It goes into our sales tax account as defined by the sales tax code associated with the project. Generally, I recommend to have a singular account, but I do know that some firms may want to have one for one state, another sales tax account for a different state, etc. So into our 21,000 sales tax collected account, all that sales tax is going to accumulate. If we look at our accounting inquiry report briefly, we'll look at all of last year as an example. We can see here is our sales tax transactions that get created when we make our invoices to our client. We can even see here's our 9170. that credits that account or increases it, and it's going to accumulate over time. Now eventually, I need to give that $1193.55 back to my tax authority. How does that occur? Very simply, on our documents in accounting, I'm going to have a vendor that represents all my various tax agencies that I'm required to remit sales tax towards. And I would actually make an operating expense, 2015 tax, the account that I would use here is, guess what? My $21,000 sales tax collected, and I would pay the amount that I owe. Let's imagine that I put this over a wire transfer, pay that the first of the year. And now as I'm putting my operating expense in and the associated payment, if we look at our account inquiry again, now we're going to have another entry. So we have all of our invoices for our tax going into the account, and we have the $1,000 that we just paid to reduce that account. So invoicing the client for any taxable goods is going to increase our sales tax account. Making an operating expense to the tax authority is going to decrease it. And that's how all sales tax flows through Design Manager, very cleanly. Invoicing the client, operating expense to remit payment to your tax authority. Great question.
All right, Brad. Another question that we have here. I have two items under a client that I'd like to merge together to create one item. Is this possible?
Good question. And yes and no is the answer. Let's imagine that scenario. So if we have our project and specifications, let's say that we have a few items in our guest bedroom, and I'll quickly generate them. Item 1. Use my OK add option to quickly make the second one. Okay, so we have item 1 and item 2. We want to merge those together. There is no function in Design Manager that would blend them together. Okay. So generally, what I would like to do is I can copy information between the two of them, okay, particularly the components themselves. So for one thing, let's say I'm going to move my information from item 1 into item 2. I would want to take any of the description to the client and simply copy and physically paste that into item 2 as necessary. More importantly, though, I can actually copy individual components. So I could highlight the components one by one on my project and specifications, copy, and actually paste that into item 2. And what this is going to do is it's going to automatically increase my pricing structure. So we can move that information by copying description and actually copying components themselves to recreate the item, and then simply delete the unnecessary extra item. So not a singular function, but you can use the mechanisms that already exist in Design Manager to achieve your goal. Any other questions out there, Lindsay?
Yeah, it looks like we have a couple. I made a change in the project for the ship to address, but the PO is not showing the new change. How do I fix this?
Great question. Okay. Let's recreate that scenario. I've got a purchase order for Cravit. And by using my purchase order status window, I can just simply reprint this. That might be easier. I'm going to be shipping this to Curtain Call's workroom. Okay. Now, I might have, and I think what the attendee is asking is, on the project themselves, if I back up a moment, let's take the Carter's Pennington home. Design Manager has a series of addresses, the billing address, of course, the site address, which may or may not be the same as the billing address, and thirdly, there is a default shipping location. By default, Design Manager is going to say, hey, would you like the ship to location to be the same as the site? But it doesn't need to be, particularly if you want all of the goods to first be delivered to the company address, or you may even have a third-party receiving area that gets all of your merchandise and then delivers itself. So if that was the scenario, and I want everything going right to my design firm, I can change it on the project. By doing so, that does not automatically update any purchase orders that I may have created already. So if we hop back on Documents in Accounting for our Carter's Pennington home, let's take a look at our Philip Jeffries. We can see the ship to is still the original site address of the client. To reflect my new purchase order, I would need to do two things. Excuse me. I need to update the components themselves by editing, and on the component window, I need to change my shipping location here. And then I simply need to edit the purchase order. Now we can see my new ship to location of the Vitanova Designs and simply process the purchase order again. So you've made your change in the project, fantastic. You need to change the ship to on any of the components that already exist and simply edit the purchase order to reflect that new ship to location. Good one, Lindsay, and a common one as well.
All right. If 100% deposit is received against a proposal, do I still have to create an invoice to close out the payment transaction for accounting ledger purposes?
100% emphatically, yes, you do. As I said before, the entire fiscal engine in Design Manager is predicated on the concept of the invoice. Okay? So when you receive that 100% deposit, that's fantastic. You've got your cash flow is at a more than adequate level. You can make all of your purchases to your vendors, etc. That transaction, however, it's going to increase your cash account, and it's going to increase your client deposit liability account, which is right here. Why is it a liability? Well, technically that is still the client's money. They can come back at any time and say, hey, I want that money back, and you have to presumably give it back to them. It's only when processing the client invoice that uses that client deposit, or as we say in Design Manager, applies the client deposit, does the client deposit account get reduced, and simultaneously you accrue your revenue and costs of goods sold. Okay, so if you're just getting the funds in via a deposit on a proposal, you're simply increasing your cash, and all of those funds are going to be sitting in the client deposit liability account. You're not going to have any revenue. You're not going to have any cost of goods sold. Most important, equally importantly, you're not going to have any sales tax as well. That goes hand in hand with our open client deposit report under accounts receivable, open client deposits. Open client deposit report, along with 4 of its compatriots, the accounts receivable report, open vendor deposit, accounts payable report, and the work in process are Design Manager's 5 recommended reports, and they become the pillars of your balance sheet. If those reports are accurate, your balance sheet will most likely be accurate. If your balance sheet is most likely accurate, your income statement is going to most likely be accurate. If you find yourself looking at your open client deposit report and you see very old transactions on here, and I mean for services and merchandise that you know you have delivered to the client, they need to get removed from this report by invoicing for those goods and services. So very, very critical concept, and I'm glad that one came up today. You always need to ultimately invoice your client for the goods and services that you've provided. It's fundamental in maintaining your proper income statement and balance sheet. Excellent question, Lindsay. I'm glad someone brought that one up as well.
All right, thanks, Brad. All right, so right now I have one more question left out here. So if anybody has any remaining questions that they want to send in to us, please do. Otherwise, this might be it. So I have one that says, we ran the open client deposit report, and we have a lot of old deposits that we have done work against. What is the best way to close out those deposits?
Great question, and very pursuant to the one we just reviewed. Let's go back to our open client deposit report. The short answer, you're going to have to invoice for those goods and services. And let's walk through that scenario. So, let's see here. I have got a deposit on Proposal 2 for the Carter's Burlington Beach Home. Let's take a look in Documents and Accounting. Proposal 2, and I can see, indeed, I did receive that deposit. Now, let's imagine, if we take a look at our status window, we've got a lot of sofa, our chairs, our bar stools for our outdoor living area. The proposal status window is quite handy, and I can easily see what items I have invoiced for. The ones that I have not invoiced for are going to be in red. So I can quickly understand that from here. I know that I received my bills from the vendor, I paid my vendor invoices, I've delivered everything and installed in the outdoor living area. As we said at the beginning of our discussion today, the Carters now are in possession of this furniture. It's time for me to make that client invoice to indicate transfer of ownership, accrue my revenue, alleviate my open client deposit, put my cost of goods sold out there, and get my sales tax. All of that happens at the invoicing stage. So let's go ahead. We'll make an invoice. Use our proposal number to filter it down. Invoice for outdoor. Use my tag all option to quickly select all of my items, and I can go ahead and notice, here's my invoice price, my sales tax. DesignMed is automatically applying that deposit for me and yielding the appropriate balance due for the Carters. Here's our invoice, and we can see on the final page, here's our deposit being applied, yielding our balance due, as we just saw, of $25.74. If we close and process our invoice by accepting, now let's take a look at our client deposit report at this juncture. Just like that, we can see our entry for our $23.40 has now dropped off the report, and our entire deposit balance has reduced appropriately. So we always need to invoice the client for that deposit or retainer to get it off of the open client deposit report. A few words of warning, however. If these are truly older deposits, and I mean in several years, those types of transactions that have been hanging around for some time, remember what happens when we invoice. We are going to be accruing revenue and ultimately some net income, we're also going to be including generating sales tax due. So the question is, where or what time frame do we want to create that invoice? I highly recommend referring to your accounting professional, but at a minimum, if you've already given your information for your 2015 taxes, I would recommend generating the invoice into 2016, okay? But you're going to get net income. In other words, you're going to be required to pay tax upon that when you file your 2016 taxes. Further, you're going to have sales tax as well. So you're going to be liable for that sales tax liability. So that's why running the open client deposit report, amongst the others I mentioned before as well, is so critical. If we do these every month, we're not going to have these long open client deposits that are going to cause us to clean them up in future years. Okay? So it's the act of invoicing the client for the goods that we receive the deposit upon will drop them from the open client deposit report. Okay, that's an excellent final question. Did any other ones come in?
Brad, actually we had two just roll in. So first, we have a voided invoice. It shows as voided, however, it continues to show up on our aging report. What can we do to remove the invoice from the aging report?
Let me think about that.
Yeah, I kind of had the same reaction as well.
I imagine, and I'm speculating here.
I know.
I'm wondering if the voided or credited invoice was actually done on a date prior to the invoice itself. What do I mean by that? Let's say that I created an invoice and I dated it June 1st, 2016. Why did I do that? Goodness knows. Maybe I simply hit the wrong key on my keyboard. But I credit that invoice in February of 2016. Wow, let's think about that. So when I'm looking at my aged accounts receivable report for February, I'm going to see a negative. I'm going to see the credit invoice. Not until June occurs, or when I run the report in June, does the balancing transaction then, quote unquote, catch up with the credit. And then they would both drop from the report. So to the attendee who asked that, I would check the dates on the report for the credit and its original invoice, and I imagine that the issue lies in with the discrepancy therein.
Yeah, that's great, Brad. Yeah, because I was trying to rack my brain how that could happen too. So, okay.
And
go ahead, Brad.
That kind of question, something a little specific like that, you can always email that, particularly the aging report itself, off to support@designmanager.com, and one of our techs could easily take a peek at that to actually have a little bit more tangible information to go on.
Okay, great. What is the simplest way to apply a deposit against an item on a proposal that has been canceled by the client? So they already applied the deposit on a canceled proposal, but they actually want to move that deposit now to an open proposal, a different one.
Okay, twofold process. I doubt that I have a good scenario where I can do that. Twofold process, and here's how we would do it. First, edit proposal 1 with the item in question that we want to remove. Okay, we edit our proposal, and we simply remove or unselect the item and reprocess the proposal. Now notice, by doing so, the deposit itself reallocates to the remaining items. Fantastic. So we're keeping the deposit associated with that proposal. But in our case, we then want to move the deposit from the unselected item to another proposal. How do we do that? Easy. We use our cash receipt window. And for instance, let's say we want to move $100 from proposal 1 to proposal 2. We got $100 on the chair. We no longer have the chair on the proposal. So I could edit or click the pencil proposal 1, put a minus 100. Credit for chair. And my this payment now reflects a minus 100 or a reduction of the deposit. I highlight proposal 2, back to our edit or pencil button, put a positive 100 in. Applying from chair. If we tag or select both, well, guess what? What's our net effect on cash? 0. We're removing 100 and we're adding 100. Yet, I'm now transferring that $100 to my new proposal. And there we go. And we can see that as a second deposit on proposal 2, increasing the amount received, and correspondingly, a negative deposit on proposal 1, reflecting the reduction. So we want to edit the proposal to remove the offending item, and then put a negative deposit on that proposal to take a piece of the deposit off for that item and apply it either as a deposit on another proposal or as a retainer or a payment on invoice, all through our cash receipt window. Another very good question and a common one as well.
All right. We have another question here. Please repeat the names of the 5 critical reports to run on a regular basis to keep your books balanced.
These are, under accounts receivable, there are 2. There's our aged accounts receivable report and our open client deposit report. Accounts payable report has 3. Aged accounts payable, open vendor deposit, and work in process. And in brief, here's what they mean. Aged accounts receivable. These are all the invoices that you've generated to your client that have not been paid in full. This one tends to take care of itself because if you invoice the client, you're going to hopefully, or at least be cognizant of the fact that whether or not the client has paid you. So that's all of your unpaid client invoices. Open client deposit we discussed already. These are all the retainers or deposits that we've received from the client that have not yet been applied to invoices. Aged accounts payable, these are all the bills, operating expenses, vendor deposits that we've recorded into Design Manager but have not yet indicated payment or written a check. Again, that one sort of takes care of itself quite frequently because if you put the bill in the vendor and have not paid it, the vendor is going to let you know at least in the near future. Open vendor deposit. These are going to be deposits or pro forma payments that you have given to your vendors on a purchase order. So if the vendor asks for 50% of an order up front before they begin the process, that's going to go into your open vendor deposit report. Very critical in maintaining accurate cost of goods sold. Lastly is everyone's favorite work in process. Work in process represents all of the goods and services for which you have paid the vendor or at least recorded the vendor invoice for what you have not yet invoiced your client. So in other words, you have purchased the table and chairs from your vendor, but have not yet invoiced the client. A very important report to, 1, ensure that you are invoicing your client on a timely basis, and 2, very critical to your cost of goods sold as well. And under our Help Center webinars, recorded webinars, monthly reports, I know we have a webinar on the 5 reports in Design Manager. There it is, 5 monthly reports to review, and there's a full hour discussion on those 5 reports for your listening and viewing pleasure. Any other ones roll in, Lindsay?
All right, let me take a look at the list here. Is there a way to void a bank deposit in which you inadvertently tagged the incorrect item check info?
Is there any way to void a bank deposit that we have recorded
that we tagged with the incorrect line item / check info. Yeah.
I'm not sure what that means, but
Okay.
yes, you can void a deposit, no problem. So if we're on our checkbook as an example, let's see here. So here is a deposit slip, and I have a deposit slip with 3 pieces of it. Okay. All of these are from various receipts, either retainers, deposit proposals, payments on invoices, or even a miscellaneous cash receipt. So if a portion of these are incorrect, I can simply go to them using my Go To button, and on the actual Documents and Accounting window, I can simply void, and that will remove it. I could also edit it to put the right check number in, or change the date, etc. So I think that's what the attendee is asking. So yes, you can delete it in its entirety, or you could simply edit it as well, and Design Manager will automatically update the deposit slip for you.
All right. That answered your question. So thanks, Brad.
All right.
And I think that's all we have out there. That's all the ones that came in via email. That's all the ones that came in on the webinar. So thank you to everyone for attending.
Yes, thanks everyone. That was a very good session, and I imagine we'll be doing some more of these in the near future. Like I said, again, always remember, on our Help Center at knowledge.designmanager.com, go to that webinars drop-down and view all of our recorded webinars, because a lot of the information that we discussed today, I go into at length on some of these sessions as well. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lindsay to close out the discussion today, and everyone have a great afternoon.
All right, so